Hi. Do I just start?
Yeah,
Okay.
if you want.
All right. I don't know where to start. My name's Michele Hill. I'm 60 years old. I live in Kearney, Nebraska. I'm married to Dennis Hill, and we have 2 children, Mason and Madison. I was born in 1955 on October 24th in Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania, which is right outside of Pittsburgh, not far from Pittsburgh. Our family lived across the river in New Brighton, Pennsylvania. That's where I went home to as a baby and spent my whole childhood there until I moved away from home as an adult. My dad, his name was Michael, and he was a hard-working man who worked his entire career for the Westinghouse Electric Company, which had a big plant in our area. And he was a draftsman and did a lot of ductwork drafting and worked hard and went to work every day and made a pretty good living, kept us comfortable. And my mother's name is Gail, and she was a housewife, stayed home and took care of us. So I have 3 siblings. When I was born, my oldest sister was 5 years old. I have an older brother who, when I was born, he was 2. And then when I was 3 and a half, my little sister was born. So there was 4 of us all together. When I was about 3 and a half, my mother and father got divorced. And I know it was so unusual at the time, but for some reason, I'm not sure of all the details because I was so little, my dad was awarded custody of all of the kids. So that really changed things and made growing up just a whole different dynamic, because this was in the very early 60s, 1960, 1961, and in the small town we lived in, people didn't get divorced. So it was strange enough that our family now is divorced, but then we also are just living with a dad and not a mother like you would expect. So shortly after that, my dad's mother and father, or my grandmother and grandfather, moved in with us to help my dad raise these 4 kids who were still pretty young, like 10, 7, 3, or 4, and 2, and that was a lot for him to take on by himself. But they moved in, and then we became quite the blended family. So now we're not, only a divorce situation, being raised by the dad alone, but now we've got a grandma and grandpa in there helping to raise us. So I grew up feeling like we were quite the anomaly in our area where we lived, and sometimes that was a little weird, but it wasn't anything horrible. So here we are, a family of 7 with 4 kids, a dad, and a grandma and grandpa. So it was a little unusual. School was, just fine. Had a great grade school that we could walk to. We could walk to the grade school, junior high and high school. And it was the kind of neighborhood where your best friend lived across the street, and you knew all your brothers and sisters' friends, and all the grown-ups in the town knew you, and watched out for everybody. So that was kind of a nice place to grow up. So in high school, didn't do much in sports. Of course, back then they didn't have a whole lot of sports for women or for girls, but I was a majorette with the band, and that was kind of fun. I was a baton twirler for many years. I probably started that when I was about 10, and I would go to competitions and do my baton twirling routines and win medals and trophies and things like that. So that was kind of my hobby, I guess, and what I did for fun and entertainment. And it was kind of a fun thing to do in high school. So I graduated from high school. I didn't go to college right away, and I went right into the workforce. So I was just barely 18, and I was working at a bank as a bank teller, and and I thought that's the path I wanted to pursue. And then by the time I was 19, I was getting ready to get married for the first time. Isn't that funny? That's how old you are now. Could you imagine getting married? So I turned 20 on October 24th that year, and I got married on November 14th. So that went along fine for about a year. Lasted about 2 years until one day I woke up and went, you know what? I think maybe we were just dating and got carried away. And shortly after that, after like maybe 2 years and some months, then we separated and I went back to being single. I left Pennsylvania at that time, decided it was time for me to have my breaking out and get out into the world, and I moved to California and lived right outside of LA in a town called Riverside, and just went out there and was gonna start over again, which I kind of did. And I got a job and just lived the California life for a while. Shortly before I left for California, though, something happened that I didn't think was overly significant at the time, but turned out to be pretty life-changing significant. I met a boy from Nebraska. I never thought of it that way before. So, when I moved to California, after a few months of being apart, and that was even only after a few months of even dating, he moved to California because he was in between jobs and thought he'd come out there. So we lived there for a while. I lived in California about a year, and then Dennis, my husband, he got a job offer in Denver, Colorado. So after a year in California, he moved to Denver. After about another 3 or 4 months with this long distance relationship, and realizing that we really didn't want to be apart, then I moved from California to Denver, and that's where we stayed for 25 years. So we had a long courtship. And I always say that it took me 5 years to reel him in, but I finally got him to ask me to marry him. And we were married in Denver, well, actually in Breckenridge. We got married in August of 1984. And then we bought a house a couple years later, and it was right after we moved into our house we finally found out that we were going to have a baby. So our son was born in 1988, in February of 1988, and that kind of, made a little family complete. And I was 32 at the time, Dennis was 34, and then we just started that phase, the parenting phase, and, raising this child and school and everything that comes with that, PTA meetings. And then about the time, after trying to have a second child, and then after quite a long time and thinking that wasn't going to happen, and making the decision that we would just have an only child, about 2 or 3 weeks before my 40th birthday, we found out that we were going to have our surprise child. And that's when our daughter Madison was born. So 40 years old, we're starting it again. We had to refigure the 10-year plan, but that was okay because that's worked out fine. After about 23 years in Denver, we we're feeling like we'd like to get closer to our family and a lot of good friends that we had in Nebraska. And I still can't believe we did it at times, but we packed up everything and we moved the whole family to the middle of Nebraska. Kearney, we got jobs, kids got into new schools, and this is where we've lived ever since then to present time. What else do you want to know?